Thank you. And thank you, Secretary Carter and General Dunford, for appearing in front of our committee today and for your service to our country. The White House has been sending mixed and at times contradictory messages about what our interests are and what threats to our security exist in the Middle East. Many Americans are understandably coming to find our current strategy somewhat reminiscent of the old Warren Zevon song, since the president's reaction it seems to be to send in lawyers, guns, and money whenever and wherever a crisis breaks out. The situation in the Middle East is a very complicated problem for our current posture, but it's certainly not historically aberrational. For more than 100 years, this region has been dominated by either external powers or internal authoritarians who have destroyed cultural institutions and disrupted the natural development of societies. The decentralization of power in these states, compounded by radical Islamism and ancient sectarian grievances, amounts to a time-tested recipe for the kind of conflict and instability that we're seeing today and that tends to threaten our security. We continue to receive mixed, contradictory reports about the effectiveness of ongoing efforts to retain, train, and equip the Iraqi security forces. When I ask why we believe it will work this time around, I'm usually told by defense officials something like the following, something like, well, we have a better political partner in Baghdad now than we did before, and we have a partner who will not repeat the mistakes of his predecessor. Now, this is not encouraging, as we know how quickly political institutions, political situations and calculations can change in the Middle East, particularly right now. So, General Dunford, I'm more concerned by what your predecessor, General Dempsey, described as the will to fight factor among the ISF. And I believe that extends beyond simply having a better leader in Baghdad. Do you believe the kind of united Iraq that we've seen for the past century, that is with borders drawn by the British and French and held together either by a Western-backed monarchy or a Ba'athist dictator, is something for which the people of Iraq have the genuine will to fight, especially when they don't have emergency assistance from a coalition like they have right now?
Senator, I think for most people in Iraq, it's a lot more local than it is national. And I do think that if a central government, for example, would outreach to the Sunni in the Anbar province and provide basic services, that we would get Sunni fighters that would fight on behalf of the government. We've seen that in the past.
So I'd like to expand the question a little bit more broadly to places like Syria or Yemen. Do people of those countries have the will to fight for united governments in places where current territorial lines may have been imposed by a foreign force?
There's no evidence that I would know of that would indicate that they would.
Unfortunately, I think that we're looking too hard for an easy answer or a simple answer to some of these complicated questions. And I encourage my colleagues and the American people to thoughtfully consider options in the Middle East before continuing down paths that I believe may lead to mission creep and to an indefinite U.S. military presence to prop up weak and sort of artificially created states designated around unsustainable boundaries. Now, the Department of Defense's Syria Train and Equip program failed. It failed by a long shot to find and train the level of fighters desired under the vetting requirements established by Congress and the White House. Congress put these requirements in place because we were very concerned about who would be using U.S. assistance and for what purposes they would be using it. Secretary Carter, does the failure of this program indicate to you that the viable ground force we desire for Syria simply does not exist within the parameters that the American taxpayer may be willing to support?
Well, I was disappointed in it as well, but I don't draw that conclusion. There are forces in Syria willing to fight ISIL and capable of fighting ISIL. We talked about the Syrian Kurds as an example of that, the so-called Syrian Arab Coalition, And in the new train and equip effort that we described today, we will look to identify and then support capable and motivated forces on Syrian territory that are willing to take on ISIL. We've identified some of them already, and the new approach is to enable them, train them, and equip them rather than trying to create such forces anew, which was the previous approach. And I do understand why that approach was taken, and you're right. It was authorized by this committee last December, and I understand the considerations that went into that. I have concluded, and the president concluded, that that approach wasn't working the way that it was conceived of a year ago, and that's precisely why we've changed the approach. So we have a different approach that we think will allow us to gain more momentum, and in particular to allow us to put pressure on the city of Raqqa, which is the self-declared capital of the caliphate. So on the Syrian side of the counter-ISIL fight, that is our intent, and we're trying to gather momentum in that and several other ways that we detailed.
Okay, thank you. I see my time's expired, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of Chairman Kane, let me recognize